Second audio test for the board stream on September 2nd.
We're excited about that scoreboard now. I know we are.
Yeah, it looks great.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this special call meeting of the Cleveland Board of Education. We're going to start with the prayer this morning, and I've asked Carol and Ingram to have that with us. Thank you.
Let's pray. Our Father, what a beautiful day you have given us. We pray that we will be mindful of all of the many blessings that you have. And now as we start this meeting to know what is best for our children, we pray that you will give us the wisdom and the guidance that we need. Now bless each member here, bless our school, bless our teachers, our children, and we will give you all the praise. And help us to be that person that you created us to be. In your name we pray. Amen.
We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. We're going to have, I'm going to have Julie call the roll so we can see all who's in attendance today, because we have Nate here and we want to be sure to recognize him. So Julie, if you do that, please.
Dawn.
Here.
Tom.
Here.
Peggy.
Here.
Carolyn.
Here.
Charlie.
Here.
Krista.
Here.
Nate.
Here.
All right. And we have all 7 board members. That's great. We need a motion to approve the regular agenda, which includes the COVID plan update and board policy 5.3052 concerning COVID leave. We need a motion and a second, please.
So moved. Second.
Okay, there we go. Did you get those, Julie? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're good. All right, Dr. Dyer, we're going to turn this over to you for the COVID-19 plan update.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in this afternoon, and those who are watching either live or will be watching later, thank you for participating as well today. Our task today is to bring the school board up to date about where we are regarding our COVID plan. I will be calling on various staff members to share at different times, so that'll be part of what we're doing today as well. And also just hear about any feedback you have for us regarding the plan and any plans that the board would want to make as far as our future plan of action regarding our COVID plan and what we're currently doing here in Cleveland City Schools. But before we get to all that, I do want to give you some information, and I'm going to ask that we pull up the presentation here, please, on the screen so that folks can see this. So first off, I do want to call to your attention is our COVID dashboard. Our dashboard is live. There for a while, we were waiting on the state dashboard to go live, and there have been some delays on that. My understanding is after Labor Day, there may be a new dashboard coming from the state, but we didn't want to wait any longer. So we've created a dashboard now that's updated twice a week. It's updated on Wednesday, Monday, and Wednesday of the week. Julie updates that information based on information coming from Laura Hudson, our coordinated school health coordinator, and we want to make sure that we're updating as often, like I said, twice a week to give the public the latest information we have. Now, with the information that was updated yesterday, we currently have 102 confirmed active COVID-19 cases within Cleveland City Schools. I also wanted to bring out from the Department of Health, Tennessee Department of Health website, in Bradley County, there have been 461 confirmed COVID-19 cases over the last 14 days for school-aged children only in Bradley County. So just to show you some numbers there to kind of let you know where we are as a district, but also over the 14-day average in our county. Also, this is a snapshot of attendance from yesterday. This is based on where we stood yesterday as far as absenteeism. And I do want to state, not all of the absenteeism that I'm reporting is due to COVID. There could be family issues, things that are, trips going on, or could be strep throat, could be the flu, could be a bad cold, could be any reason whatsoever. But the absentee rate has been up at our district. Yesterday, as a district, we were at 11.5% total. And you can see I put the student totals beside that. So 11.5 is a fairly hefty number of students to be absent on any one particular day. As you can see, that's 635 students yesterday. Arnold is 14.1% absentee yesterday. Light Bauer, 10.5%. Candies Creek, 13.5%. Mayfield, 7.7%. Ross, 10.6%. Stewart, 10.2%. Yates, 13.8%. The middle school, 15.5%. And then the high school is at 8.8%. Now today, looking at the numbers just a little bit ago, Michael Kars is the keeper of all numbers. That student absentee number has come down just a tad bit today. Not a tremendous amount, but a little bit. So, every day that's going to rise and fall somewhat. It's a day-to-day event that we look at. We have a tracker that we look at. I look at it every day, and I know others do too, just to know where we are as far as the student absenteeism. And it has been, like you might see, with a heart rate, just up and down as we go throughout from the beginning of school to where we are today.
I have a question, Dr.
Okay.
So that's normal. Without COVID, just any school year, the absenteeism changes day to day. Is this percentage of 11.5 higher than if we took COVID out of the equation?
Yes, it is. I think, Michael, I'm gonna look at you at this. If you were to give us a last year, well, maybe not last year, 2 years ago, look at where we might be on a day, just a random day, what percentage would you say would be absent on a typical school day 2 years ago?
So typically we're between 4 and 5% absent in a day. So this is more than double that.
Yeah. So that answers that question. We're more than double of the absentee that we would normally see during a normal school year without COVID being part of the equation.
Krista has a question.
So during pre-COVID days, when we would have flu take off in a school or something, what were those parameters? There have been times when we have closed schools for flu. What percentage was typically a range that you would be concerned about?
That's a good question, and there's nothing written. Right, so that's not a written procedure that we ever necessarily had. It was a judgment call, and usually it dealt around staffing. So when we got to an issue of not having enough adequate staffing at a school or schools, that's when we would look at closure more than just looking at student absenteeism. And that kind of plays into the next screen. I was gonna show you the next slide. We'll talk about where we are as far as staffing goes. So it hasn't necessarily been just a student number, although that's always part of the equation. Really, it's, do we have enough staff to adequately open that school building?
Peggy?
Yes, I was just observing, it looks like it's affecting the younger children more than the kids like the high school age.
I'm gonna ask Laura, I'm gonna look at her for that, what are you seeing, Laura, Laura's our coordinated school health coordinator for those of you who are watching online, but what are you seeing as far as numbers overall, just a trend?
Dr. Elliott and I were actually just having this conversation. The high school is still really leading the way with the total number of cases for the year, and I feel like that's what was happening last year also. We are seeing more cases in our elementary schools than we probably did last year, but just kind of a comparison of what we were seeing last year. Last year, total cases in the system, we had 515 cases that we worked. This year already, in 1 month, we've already seen 305.
With high school, I'm looking at the percentiles, not the numbers, because we're talking about a lot more students, in one school.
Right.
So wonder what the difference is.
And I can figure that up for you if you'd like.
What it says is 8% at the high school, 8.8%, and it looks like the others are except for Mayfield, are in double digits. As
Do we-
far as percentiles.
That's the absentee percentiles, correct?
Right.
Yes, and so this is COVID, like the case count. We could figure that up though really quick if you'd like.
Might be helpful.
We'll have
Okay.
Laura do a little math product on the
Yes.
side.
I'm gonna move over there beside Mr. Cars for this.
Charlie?
We're in our third week of school, right?
We're in week 4.
4, okay.
Mhm.
What was that when we started school?
When we started school, I've actually got that number pulled up over here. I give me just 1 second to get to that screen. I have a lot of screens open right now. When we were back, okay, so for the district, if you go back to August 11th, for the district, we were at 5.53%. When you go to August 19th, I'm just taking random days as I see them here. August 19th, the district was at 9.17%. If you go to August 27th, the district was at, that's not gonna pull up now.
We were out the 27th.
We're out the 27th, there you go. If you go to the 30th, August 30th, we were at 12.11%. So you can see how that has
That's what I was wondering,
gone. So, and today, September 2nd, we're at 11.86%. So you can see that it does sort of swing along as we go. But there has been an overall, I think it would be fair to say, increase in the number of absenteeism, or number of absences from students as we've progressed through this school year.
And also the absentee is like right there, that doesn't include, I mean, that's not all COVID related. So, there's other quarantine or other illnesses that they could be absent for, so.
Any other questions, Doctor? Okay.
Okay. We'll go to the next screen, our next slide. It's going to talk about, these are our staff member absenteeism, and this is based on yesterday. So just looking at yesterday's snapshot of administrator, teacher assistants, and so forth. So when you go through these different columns, it's labeled administrators, teachers, assistants, and total. The number in parentheses is if we needed to substitute, that's how many substitutes were not available. So when you look at this, for example, under Arnold, we had 3 teachers that were absent yesterday. We had 1 that was unfilled. So there were 2 field positions at that school for Arnold for substitutes. 1 was unfilled. And you can see how that operates throughout. So when you go through a school, you look at the high school, for example, there were 10 teacher absentees yesterday, and 2 of those went unfilled. So 8 of those were filled positions. But when you add all those up, for a total of yesterday's teachers, we had 38 total teachers that were out for whatever reason, and 16 of those were unfilled. So those were 16 unfilled positions of classrooms. So if you think about a school like Yates or Ross, if you were to put 16 of those in one building, you can see how that would be. Now, we're able to stay open because that spreads amongst all of our buildings. And we have some of the best teacher assistants and others that are jumping into classrooms and helping us to remain open. Now, saying that, we also had 16 total teacher assistants absent yesterday, and 8 of those were unfilled. So, you know, we have to take it on a day-to-day basis. And what I've shared with our principals is that, you know, when we talk about remote learning, we're going to get on all those things here in a few minutes. That's on another slide. But I've told them they know their school better than anybody else. You know, we're out there, I come and visit schools often, we all do, but our principals are the ones I'm relying on to give us the best information coming from their school. If they feel like they're getting to a point where keeping those doors open is really a problem and we need to look at remote learning, I expect them to come to us and share that information so that we can start making plans and doing what we need to do. At this point, I've not been approached by any principals to say we need to go down that road. Attendance today is looking a little bit better. I have this is from 6:30 this morning. The latest that we had, and ASOP, which is our substitute computer system, we had 23 of 37 spots requiring subs that are filled. So we have 37 as of this morning, total positions that required a sub, and 23 of those have been filled. So we are adding substitute teachers. They are coming in. We are starting to see more applicants. We can always take more. So anybody that's watching, we always have more substitutes that are qualified to go into classrooms. So that's something that we are definitely need to do. So it is better today somewhat. And, but again, that's a day-to-day basis. Every day is different, and we just have to see what each day brings us. Typically, Fridays and Mondays are going to be your toughest as far as filling spots and also just absenteeism. So we're doing, I think, no thinking. I know those principals and our teachers and their teacher assistants and cafeteria workers and bus drivers, they are doing everything possible to provide a quality education in a really hard environment right now.
What do you do? What do you do when you can't find a substitute for a teacher?
Well, you have teacher assistants that have to maybe not do RTI that particular day, and maybe they transform from being an RTI small group leader into being a leader in that classroom for the day. Mm-hmm. So we are blessed in the system to have a number of really qualified and fantastic teacher assistants that can step up and go into those classroom environments. Now, that pulls them away from what they originally may have been hired to do. So RTI is wonderful, and we have to have RTI in the program, but we have to have somebody in the classroom to make it happen right now. So we're working in that case on an emergency basis to have to pull people around. Dr. Elliott, is there anything you would want to add on that? I mean,
yeah, I would say assistants are doing a lot of the work in that regard as far as those intervention programs. They're having to go into those classrooms, but also our special teachers. Sometimes they're having to cover for classes like that. So maybe a PE teacher or someone in those specialty areas. Also our administrators.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Taught as well. I know a principal and assistant principal this week that did that and taught some English classes and things like that. So
yeah. Well, and I was looking at Doug Moore behind us over there. Doug Moore was the assistant principal yesterday at Blackbower Elementary School. So, you know, we're doing what we have to do.
We had to combine classes though, have we?
Not combining classes necessarily. You do have to meet BEP requirements. So there could be, I'm not saying that hasn't happened, but that's the last straw. That's what you don't want to do, but you may come to a point where that's the only choice. But I am heavily relying on our principals to keep us updated so that I can keep you updated about what we're doing and where we're going. And if we need to go remote or do something like that, we need to know so that we can make the application and go down that road. We don't want to wait and do this kind of thing last minute, because I know that's hard for families and everyone else. So we're trying to do as much as we can to be as transparent as possible about where we are.
Dr. Dyer, this is Nate. Quick question for you. The teacher column here, do you have the total number of teachers that are active in the system available?
Cindy, do you know the total number off the top of your head for teachers?
It's around 450,
Yeah.
460.
It's around 450 total.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second part was these numbers are instructional and admin. It doesn't include additional or other support staff. Is that correct?
That's correct. This doesn't include bus drivers, cafeteria staff, those kind of folks. That number is not indicated here.
And so do we have any numbers around that as far as absentee so we can get a bigger picture or see the full picture?
Yeah, I can get that for you. That's not that hard to pull. This chart, we just didn't want to make it huge. I think if you were to take, for example, bus drivers, we've had vast majority of them come to work. I know we've had an instance where we have one or two that could not make it, but for the most part, looking at Hal Taylor, he's here too. That has been able to work itself out. We've had to cancel a bus route or two, but other than that, that's been okay. Cafeteria, that's been a little bit of a struggle. Again, finding substitutes right now is just really difficult, including for cafeterias, school nutrition. So we've had people just jump in and go to work in there and do things outside of their normal job duties, which is fantastic. And that's the kind of staff we have in Cleveland City Schools. But I can get that number for you. I don't have it right here in front of me right this second, though.
That's fine. I don't really need the number. I just wanted to really point out that these numbers are just instructional and there's other considerations.
Exactly. Operational staff, and that's the thing, this is what we talked about on the commissioner's call yesterday, because we have a commissioner's call every Wednesday. When we're looking at remote learning, it's not just your instructional staff and not just students. If you don't have the number of bus drivers needed to get students safely to school, you may have to go remote at that school. Or if you don't have the number of cafeteria staff, you need to open the cafeteria. You may have to cancel that school as being in person and go to a remote. So you do have to look at every day, you have to look at all those different ramifications. Kelly Kaiser and Dr. Elliott and I, we have early morning get-togethers and make sure, or evening, and make sure that the next day we have what we need and kind of look at what direction do we need to go. So far, we're hanging in there, and if I say we, it's a team effort. Everybody's pitching in and doing above and beyond work, and that's just kind of what you see in the school system. But I'm very proud of the effort, but we're going to be realistic too. And if we need to change something, then we just have to make that change.
Dr. Dyer, didn't Kelly Kaiser present us something about a group that works in getting subs there? We haven't changed that.
Right. Now, the next board meeting, our regular board meeting, that will be something that we'll be discussing as an agenda item. Is looking at a way to help with that.
Actively recruit and we're supposed to be pretty good at it, Kelly told us.
Right. Okay, moving right ahead, just basically want to go through a reminder of our tier system, and I'm going to look at Dr. Elliott to maybe take us through this as a COVID leader, task force leader. Hal Taylor is also here. I'd like Hal to do some reminders for us about our HVAC, our fresh air intakes, because that's something that you hear about on the news every once in a while. So maybe we can start with Hal with the operational side of things, just to get it back on the record again about what we're doing on your side of the table to ensure we're doing, operate safely.
Okay. We are, one of the basic things that we're doing, you have sanitizing, which is when you actually absolutely clean everything. But more importantly, it's disinfecting. I mean, that's what really kills the germs. That's what, that is what we're more concerned about. So every day we're disinfecting all the classrooms. The custodial staff has been instructed to put that as the first priority. Because even if there's a little dirt on the floor, if we disinfect the classrooms, we have killed those germs that can be passed around. So that's a priority we have put over the classrooms. Also the buses, we are continuing to disinfect the buses every day on a daily basis. So that's one thing that we started that, with the buses even before COVID came along, and we did that last year in all our classes. We've also have in our air conditioning systems, you invested and had ESG come in, and part of that in the high school was actually adding fresh air to the east wing. So now throughout all of our schools, we have fresh air that comes in. So anytime you have a classroom, you have fresh air constantly being exchanged. So you don't have stale air. You're not breathing the same air constantly. Within a few hours, you have a completely changeover in all your air. And what we've been doing with the energy management is we've turned those, as we have climbed back up, Cliff will be turning that fresh air amount back up. We may sacrifice some energy savings to get more fresh air into the classrooms. and get the stale air out. And then along with that, we use a medical grade filter. We use a pleated filter in all our units. It's a medical grade filter, so it's providing us really good filtration and catching the particles that we have coming through. And that's following guidelines and suggestions. And we've been doing that for a number of years as well. So that we started long before COVID.
Dr. Artone has a question.
Hal, over the last year or so, I guess, I've noticed these vaporizer type things. They're going in and spraying like airplanes and classrooms and things like that what is that?
That's an electrostatic, that's what we're using too. And that is an electrostatic sprayer. And what it does is it creates a positive and negative charge. So instead of it just being a fog where the fog goes out and falls straight down, it's a positive charge. Well, everything in the room has a negative charge compared to what's being spread. So when that goes out, it goes down and it actually moves sideways and it will stick to the surfaces on the side. So in our school buses, it doesn't just fall into the seat where they sit, it actually sticks to the side of the seats where the kids our backs and their shoulders are going. It sticks to the front of the seat where they're breathing. So we're actually, by using those electrostatic foggers, we're putting the disinfectant where it needs to be. And we're actually covering a surface much better. It's not getting just the top here, it's getting the back of the chair, it's getting under the desk a little bit. So that's why we use those, is because they do such a better job of putting the disinfectant out where it needs to go.
So you don't go in and wipe everything down after?
That actually, no, we don't want to. We want to let it dry. It takes 10 to 15 minutes to dry. And if you wipe it off, you've just wiped all your protection off. So we want to let that go in and we want it to dry on the surface because that's what kills the germs.
Yeah, okay.
Good question. Okay. Well, why don't we move it to the tiers and just kind of go through this just to make sure everybody's clear on that and answer any questions you might have.
Sure. This year, as we began the year, we started where we are in terminology tier 1, and even before that, we weren't calling it tier 1. We were starting with several of these protocols in place, like Mr. Taylor's already been saying, and so those were in place already as we began the year. Of course, after the first week or the second week into the year, we started noticing a rise in absentee rate, then the traditional numbers like Mr. Carr shared earlier. Plus, we also were noticing these cases pop up with our students with the COVID cases and our staff. So as we came back together as a task force, we started saying, how are we going to monitor this year and stay on top of it? So we started looking at, not only are we going to want to look at our attendance rate as a school and school system, but we want to definitely watch our COVID case numbers in each school and see how it's happening in a community school in each individual school. So we set up criteria based off of that very thing and looking at 3 questions that we ask ourselves. Are 10% or more of all students at a specific school absent? The other question we ask is, does 1% of the student enrollment at a specific school have a confirmed active COVID-19 case? And then we also wanted to take a look at, and we do take a look at, do we have confirmed link cases in a specific school, maybe within a classroom or a specific area, a shared area that students are participating in. So we take a look at those 3 questions, and if 2 of those 3 questions are true, then we start asking ourselves, what do we need to do to increase the mitigation factors in that building to help out? So we have a tier 2 approach where right now, currently, if you look at our dashboard, we have all but one of our schools in tier 2 at this time. The other school is still in tier 1. But tier 2, we continue our mitigation measures. A couple of things that we added regarding that is we're limiting the number of visitors into the building, mainly non-academic visitors. Now, if we have a person who comes in to help do a presentation with a partner with our teacher or someone like that for an academic reason, they still come in, but the majority of our visitors continue to be remain on the outside of the building, and our assistants or administrative assistant will greet them at the front of the school to help them out with what they need. And these kind of things like closing the water fountain, we had jump-started the year, even in later than the summer, we started approving some field trips that would be later this fall and those kind of things in anticipation that we were getting back to a somewhat normal environment. However, as we go into tier 2, we're looking at that would be during that period of approval. If that school was in tier 2, then some of those day field trips would be suspended, and just schools and families would know that that is the case. So those are some of the tier 2 things that we implemented, along with a few others. And then tier 3, we just clamped down even more, increasing the limited number of hallway exchanges, the number of classes moving out at the same time, staggered class changes like at our middle school, and one-way hallways at our high school, and some other things there in tier 3. We monitor this daily, as Dr. Dyer said. We take a look at how our staff numbers and student numbers are going and look at this, but specifically on Tuesdays and Fridays, we really do this formula and ask those questions if we need to transition to the next tier, either on a Monday or a Wednesday of the week, so that we can notify the school, and then the school principal and their staff can notify the families in a timely way. So that's the way we are doing it. We'll do our meeting again tomorrow after our numbers come in, attendance, and ask those 3 questions of each school and determine if it's time for any schools to transition to the next tier. These tiers occur for a 2-week period unless determined by the task force that meets that we need to extend that for whatever reason. So potentially we have 3 schools, as you see on the dashboard, that 2 weeks ago we transitioned to tier 2. So tomorrow, as we look at numbers, specifically those 3 schools will be considering, have the numbers improved? Do we stay at tier 2 because they're improving? Or are they continuing to show that we have these criteria occurring and we need to transition to the tier 3 approach? So we'll be looking at that tomorrow. So that's the way the tier approaches are occurring this year regarding that. That also allows for, as things improve, we can open the school back up to visitors and more gatherings for schools and get back to that tier 1 opportunity again. And that's our goal for sure.
Jeff, I think this is a really good idea. What about lunches? You have all of these kids at the middle school and the high school that are hundreds of them going into the cafeteria in and out. And elementary can be a big exchange also, because it's like every 5 minutes there's a new class coming in the cafeteria. I know the teachers don't like this idea, but is eating lunch in the classroom an option, or is it on any of the tiers, or any suggestion?
Yeah, well, a couple of things about that. First of all, last year we had the opportunity to have a waiver from the state for duty-free lunch with our teachers. And so that helped us to provide a little bit of more flexibility so teachers could have the classes have lunch in the classroom on a rotating basis. This year, we do not have that waiver opportunity right now in place. So our teachers, we want to honor their duty-free lunch. But we do have a plan that if tier 3 goes into effect, to add as much of spreading them out as much as we can, whether it's maybe doing a couple of locations for lunch and in that case, but what that entails is additional staff, like we talked about, spreading out and doing some extra lunchroom monitoring, supervising of the kids. So that would be an additional mitigating factor that we can layer in as things go along in that case.
And I'd like to add to that, Dr. Elliott, we visited Candy's Creek School on Monday, and they have that wonderful multi-purpose room, and the principal informed us that they're trying to divide those cafeteria visits into those 2 rooms so they could space the students out. So I think some principals are doing that, whether they are in that tier or not, just to provide that extra protection for the students.
Yes. And to piggyback on that, as far as eating times, our breakfast time, our schools now are, instead of very similar to the way we did last year, but instead of the students gathering in breakfast in those large areas for breakfast, they're going, as they arrive on campus, they're grabbing their breakfast and going on into the classroom, or they're eating for a brief period of time, enough time to eat and moving on instead of waiting in one location for an extended period of time. So, which leads to teachers coming in a little earlier than traditionally so that they can all be in the class to receive those students when the doors open each day. And so we're doing that to help out as well.
Peggy? Yeah, every year the Rotary brings dictionaries to the third graders, and they usually talk about the dictionaries, after when they deliver them. If the school is in tier 2, would that be considered academic, or should they just leave the dictionaries and not talk about them, or would they be welcome to come in?
For a connection to the classroom like that, we could do that. Again, it would be in that cohorting situation where it go into the classroom. Sometimes, I know previous years, we might have pulled a whole grade level or a group together to do a presentation, a larger gathering. But for this time period, it would be in that smaller environment
Each class.
to help us out with that kind of situation. Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Carolyn?
Jeff, has any number or percentage been determined as to when a class or a school would be, you would look at them to possibly close?
We've been really looking at that closely, and this week, especially after we received the waiver form, when we get to talk a little bit more about the remote learning piece. So we have been monitoring that, and a lot of that, I think, depends on those close link cases that we're talking about. And it's a balance here, because if we have the staffing, first of all, and we can continue that classroom open as much as we can, as long as we know that the students look like they're being safe, because we're looking each morning, we're asking the nurse, are you seeing any connections? Have we heard anything from the health department? Talking to Laura Hudson there. So we're trying to keep them open. But if, we started looking at this, and we're thinking that if you start getting closer to that, half of that class out, then it's going to be more advantageous then to probably go to a remote situation where we can do that tipping point of having all those students that are there go home, get online, plus even potentially some of those that are not there because they're quarantined and maybe still can get online. Then we get over that 50%, so we're back to majority of the class receiving that daily education and academic teaching. So that's pretty much what we're looking at right now, but we're monitoring it each day because, again, and we're listening to what the state asks and is accepting as far as waiver requests at the state level. We know that some of those requests have been honored and some of them have been denied. And so we're keeping a close ear and eye on where is that breaking point, what the state would like to see. So, but of course, if the teacher and the staff members can't cover that class, then that could lead us to needing to go remote and team teaching with maybe a paraprofessional, but letting a certified teacher or a specialist teacher that's a certified teacher be supporting the other classroom teacher who's doing some additional remote teaching as well.
And just to add to that, another consideration with that is if you have a staff member who's out because they have COVID or strep throat or the flu or a bad cold, if they're using a sick day, I'm not going to ask that teacher to teach remotely. They are sick and they don't need to be teaching in person. They don't need to be teaching remotely. They need to rest so that they can come back to us sooner. So that's one of those aspects you may have to look at. Another option, which is inclement weather day for a school or for the district, if we get to a point where too many staff members are physically ill for whatever reason, because I'm just not going to ask people to work if they're sick. That just doesn't make sense. Now, if they're quarantined at home, for being a close contact and they're not actually showing symptoms or ill, that's a different thing. We can do some remote learning that way, and we can do some different types of telework even. But if somebody's physically ill, that's the point where I'm not going to ask them to work at home. I wouldn't want to do it, and they don't need to do it.
Dr. Dyer, is the state letting the superintendents know when they're turning down waivers, why they're turning them down?
They are.
Okay.
And they are. I only know of one waiver in our area that was turned down and it was needing some more specific information. And they got that information and that waiver was then approved.
So, but you all know that as superintendents,
We
so you can come back when we're
We do.
applying and say that won't work. We know
Yeah.
that because they turned down.
It seems to me the state is looking heavily, and again, I'm not the commissioner's office, I'm just, based on what I'm looking at, it looks like they're looking at staffing as being the number one reason why you might go remote. Student illnesses is gonna play a part of that, that's part of the form you send in, but your staff numbers are what look like is the biggest factor as far as that goes.
Okay, I have another question. What constitutes exactly a field trip? If the field trip takes place on a Saturday, when the kids are not in school, is it up to the parents to decide whether they can go?
Well, if it is a class-based field trip, that's what we were talking about here in academics. So if it's and the whole class is involved, then that would be the field trip like we're talking about. If it's an extracurricular option, something above and beyond, then we are allowing that extracurricular team, we're conferring with them and making some decisions right now. Like, for instance, if the band travels in the evening to go to a football game to play, that is under our approval process for a trip, but we are still allowing that as we follow TSSAA guidelines and those kind of rules related to our sports. We're applying very similar guidelines for those kind of trips beyond the school day.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically of RILA, which is a leadership program, and it usually involves just about 4 students.
Sure.
And they do go on a bus to Camp Nakanawa and Crossville, Tennessee.
Yeah,
It's not a-
that's not a sanctioned field trip, that's an outside organization, that's Rotary.
Mhm.
So I think that would be up to parents, because that's not
That's what I
something
thought.
that's approved through what we do. Now, I will say, kind of playing off that question, questions sometimes come in about band or athletic teams and things like that. And I'll tell you, we take them through the same 3 criteria that is listed up here. So, we had an incident, and I'll let Dr. Elliott kind of talk about that. I don't want to say the specific team or organization, but we had a team that had to be put on not suspension, but had to suspend their actions for a determined amount of time because they had a COVID situation. So, you were heavily involved in this, and Doug too, so.
Yeah, Mr. Moore and Laura Hudson, Mr. Kaiser and I were notified a couple of weeks ago about a team who we had some cases that had come in, and they were starting to come in. And so we really wanted to take a close watch on that. So we were asking questions. We were calling the principal, the athletic directors and the coaches and saying, tell us a little bit more what's going on. And so as we started digging, we kind of realized that there were several cases here going on. And so we started asking ourselves these 3 questions, the criteria related to the team, not the school. And they all started, they would all be true, not only over 10% of the team, but over 1% were definitely COVID cases. And also, obviously, they were lean because they'd been around each other. And just out of precaution, we decided we're going to ask the team to stay back, shut down for a couple of days, let's monitor it. So we monitored over the weekend, and then there started being more cases come in. And so we talked with the coach and the athletic director and principal and said, we need to hold off for a while. So we took that situation, and that's the way we'll have to do for some of these extracurricular groups, and really monitor it and see what kind of escalation occurs around these cases on the team, so we can decide the longevity of that. We were able to, it took about a week for that team, for us to work that back so that everybody felt comfortable to coming back and being back into the mainstream as far as participating in that activities beyond that.
So I brought that up because, we do hear from people about, well, band got to do this, or choir got to do that, or cheerleaders went here, or football did this, and yes, they did. And they're still, they're still competing, and Friday night, tomorrow night will be a jam-packed, Benny Monroe Stadium. But we do operate under TSSAA regulations as far as that goes, and they've shifted that down to the local level and say, follow what your local procedures are. So that's what our local procedures are. We are not going to put student safety above playing an athletic event or playing the saxophone or cheerleading or dance or anything else. But we do think it's a pretty fair process to go through. If this is what we're judging our classrooms, our schools by, then it seems to work fairly well for those organizations as well. And that played into decisions we had to make already.
All right, move forward.
Okay. All right, looking at important reminders, I want to make sure we can go to the next slide, please. Just some things we've already talked about, but I want to say it out loud and put it in print here in front of you. As of last Friday from the Commissioner's Office, remote learning is now an option. Remember, that was not an option that school systems had until last Friday. So now we do have an option, if approved by the Tennessee Department of Education for individual classrooms and schools, just like Dr. Elliott said, the entire district may not close and use remote learning. Okay, so we do not have that option. I want to make it very clear. It's not a local decision you all have made. This is from Tennessee Department of Education and others that are involved in that process. We cannot close the entire district and go remote this year. Not an option. But I will state that if a school closes, for example, just an example, if the middle school were to go remote, all extracurricular activities during that time that we would be remote cannot take place. Whether it's after school band, after school choir, theater, football, you can't have anybody in the weight room after school. None of that can take place during that period. And we can only do remote learning for 7 days. Okay, so after 7 days, you would have to have another waiver approved by the Commissioner of Education. So it's on an every 7-day rolling process. So that's how that would operate, and that's how that works. Okay. Hybrid learning. I've had people ask a lot about this. Can we go, for example, at the high school to a hybrid learning approach where you have an A-B schedule? You know, students in group A come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, B comes Tuesday, Thursday, then you flip-flop the next week. And the answer is no. Again, that's not a local decision that any of us have made. That's through the Commissioner's Office. Right now, we do not have an option to do a hybrid schedule like we've had last year. So I just want to make that clear, okay? Inclement weather days. As you know, we have used 2 inclement weather days. We do have, and just a point of clarification, we have 7 remaining. We had originally said 6, but we went back and calculated there are actually 7 remaining inclement weather days. And we also have some professional development days that if we needed to convert to school days, we could. So we're in good shape as far as that goes at this point, and hopefully we stay that way. But inclement weather days may be used to close a particular school, which again, that was new. That has gone back and forth, but now we have it from the Commissioner's Office that an individual school can now close for inclement weather day if we need to. For example, if Candy's Creek, if we see that, you know, we're dealing with a staffing shortage or whatever the case may be, and we don't have enough teachers to still go remote, we could use an inclement weather day just for that school, or you can use it for the entire district. So just to be clear on that as well, remote learning does not take place on an inclement weather day. So when you're closed for inclement weather, you are literally closed. There's no nutrition that's provided. Food services are closed. The whole school is closed, just like you would if it was a snow day. Okay, so that's something I want to make it very clear. Remote learning is not an option on the inclement weather day.
Dr.
Yes.
How would you describe remote learning? What exactly is remote learning?
Remote learning is being able to use our devices. Okay, so you're using the technology that you all have approved and we have purchased, and we have the devices, we have the MiFi hotspots that we can send home for students that don't have.
And the teachers would teach like from home?
You can teach remotely, yes.
Gotcha.
So the students and teachers can be wherever they need to be, a public library, whatever the case may be, and remote learning can take place. And it can get way more descriptive than that, but that's just a layman's way of saying it. You remotely can have your classroom experience in a way that's not a traditional in-person experience.
So you could do it for one school, or you could do it for individual classrooms?
You could do it for one school, but you just can't use it for the entire district.
Right, gotcha.
Can I ask a question about weather days? We've used 2 and we have 7 more coming up. If we have and I know this, well, if we always have to plan for it. If we have a severe winter and we use 7 plus, what do we fall back on?
At that point, we do have some professional development days, like I've said, that are out there that we could convert to, back to school days. Now, we'd have to get the commissioner's approval for that because it's already on our calendar, but we could do that. So I think that would get us 3 additional days.
3 more days.
Yeah, so we do have what could be 10 days, but let's say we use all those and need 2 more. Then you may have to come back as a board if we don't get a waiver for those and say, okay, we're going to have to make up 2 days of school, either at the end of the school year, or some school systems have to use Saturdays in the past, or other ways to do that. Now, no one wants to do that, and I get that from employees, from students, from anybody, but if the commissioner doesn't give you a waiver for those extra days, you would have to make them up somewhere. Hopefully, we would not get to that point.
But you have to plan.
But you have to plan. Another question I get often, I know you do too, is about contact tracing. So contact tracing is conducted under the authority of the health department here locally with assistance from school officials as requested. We do have a great relationship with our local health department. Laura Hudson has worked closely with the health department here, and I'm going to ask her if she can just tell the board and community that's listening a little bit about this partnership we have and how this works.
So we really worked to develop this process over the last few weeks. Right now, what we're doing is we're sending a daily report to our liaison at the health department. They just reinstated our COVID liaison, school liaison at the health department last week, I believe. So during this week, we've kind of worked to get a process together. And so what we're doing now is we're sending a daily report of all of our confirmed cases for the day. And our liaison is taking that report. We're sending her contact information for those students, just that directory information that we're allowed to give them. And then they are flagging those cases in their system. So as those come in, they know that they're Cleveland City Schools students. They know that they're positive. And so then they start doing the case investigation and start leading that investigation. If they recognize any, like if they're in their investigation, see any kind of trends, like if we see some classrooms that need some attention or sports teams, athletic or extracurricular activities, anything like that, they will let us know. And I talk to them 2 or 3 times a day usually. So if there's identified close contacts, so if a student says, yes, I sit beside, these people in class, I would say that they were close, we were within 6 feet, we weren't masked, just kind of that quality of your contact. Then she will send those names back to me and I will give her the directory information for those students. So that's kind of how we've worked this process out. And we've actually done some contact tracing through this week, so.
I have a question. So when you provide the health department a list of perhaps the COVID students, the parents have told you they tested positive, how do they get the names of the contacts? Do they contact the close contacts? How does the health department know who to call?
So they will call the case. That will open up the investigation, and they will call the case. And when they call the case, if the case gives them a name of a student, then we will give them the contact information so they can call those families.
But you don't give them the names of the contacts. That's up to the patient.
That's up to the case investigator to identify those contacts.
Okay.
Yeah, and I will say this has been a work in progress over the last few weeks to really get it to a point now where I think we're working at, it's gotten a lot better. And I think we now know clearly what the health department needs. They know what we're able to give them, and that partnership is definitely growing in the right direction. So I feel very good about where it is now. It was a little rocky there at the beginning, but I do feel good about where we are now. We're taking extra precautions, extra steps, and I think we're in a good place now.
And having someone in our local health department also that we communicate with daily is also a great benefit. We didn't have that until just recently.
Yeah.
So do we know if that contact has been traced, has been advised? Your child was sitting next to a COVID child, and does the health department give you that feedback, said, okay, we have contacted these close contacts?
So with our local liaison, what she will do, she knows that they need a letter. So she always offers that letter that they can give to the school. So whenever the student calls and says, hey, I was, I'm a close contact. The health department has called me. I have a letter, so we will accept that. She does, again, send me those names so that I can give her that directory information. So we do have that information, but if one gets missed somewhere, then we're able to pick that up with the document that the health department provides.
Check and balance. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions before? Okay, thanks.
Okay, we'll go to the next point then. And another question I get a lot, why doesn't the school system require vaccinations for students and staff? And quite frankly, we cannot, by law, require that staff or students have the COVID vaccine. So that's something that verified through our attorney and everything. So that's just kind of an answer to that. We are not allowed to. And the last point that I have on this screen is just a reminder. Oh, sorry.
What percentage of our teachers took the vaccination when you headed back?
Well, I could just say staff overall, the day that we had the mass vaccination, the 2 days for both of the shots, we had about 400 come through that day. So that's roughly half of the staff came through for vaccinations. And then I'm sure others went out and got it on their own in other places too. I did. I personally went somewhere else and got both mine. So they'll have an exact number for you to show you that X percentage of our staff has a vaccination, but I would say it's a good majority, but I wish that others that are out there, quite frankly, would consider that option as well. That would help us to stay open, but I can't mandate it. And I can't go down the hallway and ask everybody who got vaccinated, who didn't, and do any of that. So, but it definitely would help us. The more people that we can get vaccinated in our school system that are age 12 and older, the better we're gonna be. But of course, we can't require that. And that's a family choice as far as that goes, but we certainly do, we're a proponent of it, just like the governor and our mayors have stated.
Okay.
The final point here, our nurses now do have the opportunity and to test for COVID-19 in our health clinics. We're very proud of that. We got that grant, of course, from the state. Laura Hudson did a great job writing that and making sure that we got the funds to do some really neat things for COVID this year. Even though we were hopeful that the numbers would stay down, here we are, and we're back in the thick of it again. Just a reminder to do that for students, parent permission is required, so we can't just, I want to make sure the public knows that, we can't just start testing students if we think they're symptomatic, that there is a parental part of that permission is required. We also can test our staff. So we have a staff member that may have symptoms. Remember, those symptoms mask a lot of things. Hay fever, I saw that on the news today, is huge right now. So, if right now I had, some kind of symptom, I could go get a test and it may come back negative, and I may just need to go get an allergy shot for the day. So doing that will allow us to keep our staff in buildings if they're testing negative. And that's something that's a real plus for us. Now, we're still trying to get more supplies in.
Well, actually, those were received yesterday.
Good,
So we'll be expanding that. Right now, we're just testing staff for return to work. But we're hoping to expand that in the next week or so to the rest of our staff and students as needed.
Yeah, so we're moving the right direction with that. We're glad to be able to offer that. And hopefully as we get more supplies in, we can open that door even more.
How long does it take to get the results?
That's a good question. How long does it take?
So we offer a rapid test, and that's about a 10-minute test. And then we also have a PCR that will be available, and that is a 30-minute result. So pretty quick turnaround for both of them.
Yeah, but the more we can do that in-house.
Can we go in and take it too?
Well, I'm love to
Absolutely.
look at that. So, but the more we can do that, the more staff we can keep in our buildings. If they're testing negative, of course, they test positive, that's a different story, but it's good to know that on the front end as well. All that is heavily confidential, just like if you were going to a regular medical provider. So that's something that we are big on, is privacy with that.
So if a parent thought their child might have it, they would come to school with them maybe that day and have you test them right then?
We have a system worked out for that.
Yes, we will communicate that. I think a lot of students will see the benefit as a return to school. So if they are quarantined, you can test out of quarantine on day 5, 6, or 7 and return on day 8. And so to get back to school just a little bit sooner, students, I think, will take advantage of that testing.
Oh, that's good.
So if we move to the next slide, I'll ask Laura if she'll come to the board here. And sort of walk us through what we're seeing. This is a graphic that was designed by actually the Franklin Special School District. And I asked Dr. Snowden if we could borrow that. And at the very small disclaimer on the bottom gives credit to the Franklin Special School District. But I really thought this was just a great way to show the power of wearing a mask in a building. Whether it's a school setting, whether it's at your church, it doesn't matter where it is. I know we're not necessarily wearing them here, but we are distanced away from each other. So, when we start thinking about this, right now masks are requested to be worn in our schools. I mean, that's something we request everyone to do. And this chart does a good job of showing how masks minimize student exclusions from school itself. Now, the little asterisks on the bottom show that not every classroom is set up just like this. You have different configurations of classrooms and things, but this is just taking a generic classroom and showing you how this works. So Laura, would you mind kind of showing us what we're seeing here?
So we'll start with this one. So the new guidance says that no matter the distance, if both the case and the contacts are masked appropriately, then you are not excluded from school for quarantine. So you're not considered a close contact. So here, this is your positive case and everybody is masked. And so you can see everybody gets to stay in school. They're the green dots. So over here, your positive case, 9 students are without mask around, or this, let's say the positive case is the masked student, or not masked student, I'm sorry. And the yellow circles all around them, even if they're wearing a mask, would have to quarantine. They would be considered a close contact. So it has to be both participants there, the contact and the positive case have to be masked. So are there any questions about that?
I think that would be a good picture to have in the newspaper, because I think a visual image helps you understand it a lot better.
It does, and that's what I really like about this. The graphic does a great way of explaining it better than words sometimes. And you've noticed that from the local hospital, they've been using infographics to get out there about the word, about who's vaccinated, who's on ventilator, all those kind of things. So that's really important. It speaks volumes, I think, for what we're trying to do. And, if everybody in the classroom was wearing that mask in that particular case and wearing it appropriately, then you can see only one student is excluded. And that's the student who has that case of COVID.
And I know, it may seem if people in your classroom are not wearing their mask and you are wearing yours, it's still beneficial.
Yes.
Just because if you're the one that, is COVID positive and you're wearing your mask, and then everyone around you if they're not masked, they are going to have to quarantine. But if I'm wearing a mask and I'm positive and 3 of the 5, are also masked, then we're only sending 2 students home for quarantine. Right. So it has to be both persons, though. It can't just be one.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Laura, in your opinion, are those blue, I don't know what you call them, the paper kind of masks, are those good enough? Or do we need to graduate to the multi-layer cloth?
The Department of Health doesn't really indicate which is better. It just asks for a mask. So, there's hospital grade mask and then the fabric mask, the neck gaiters, all of those are, they don't differentiate which kind of mask you wear. It's just if you are masked.
Okay.
So just one that they give you everywhere you go, those are good?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have masks available in all of our schools for all of our students. Most of them have fabric masks still that they are able to hand out and, reuse. And then we also have paper masks, so.
Which, thank you very much, brings us to the next slide. And the question that I have in regards to masks, right now masks are requested, not required for students and staff. Last year, of course, they were required for students and for staff. So the question I have for the board to discuss is, do we stick with the plan that we have for this year, requested, not required? That's what you last passed when we met in May regarding our plan. Or do you see a need to change that and go a different direction regarding requiring masks for students and staff? at this point. So I'm going to open that door and really let you all discuss what you think may be the best option for us moving forward.
So if you all look at the slide that Dr. Dyer's prepared there, we know there's an executive order from the governor at number 84. And no matter what we mandate, anyone can opt out if they, whatever procedure Dr. Dyer and his staff set up, when we talked about a written opt-out, that a parent would have to opt out of the child wearing a mask. We have to decide, is this K-12, Dr. Dyer? Would you consider it for the whole ages, or?
That's really up for you to decide at this point. If you're looking for a recommendation, I would say if you're gonna do it for students, that I would recommend starting in the early ages and going all the way, especially since there is an opt-out provision. If a parent doesn't want their child to wear it, they could opt them out in kindergarten or 8th grade or whatever the case may be.
So I'm gonna throw this out to the board members. If somebody would like to make a motion, or Dr. Dyer, do you want to make a recommendation? You want to hear what the board says first?
I think I would like to hear, because I know you all have opinions, and this is something that you represent your constituents out there, so I would be interested in hearing what you have to say.
So even though we say they are required, a parent can still opt out?
Yes, a parent can opt their child out, or if a student's at the high school and they're age 18 and older, they can opt themselves out of that, of course.
How do they go about opting out?
If you go, can you go to the next slide real fast? And I have actually linked that. So if you can go to the opt-out form, I'll show it to you. This is something that we've created that will be on our website. So if you pass a masking mandate for students, I'm gonna qualify that, say this is for students, this is not for staff. So this is for students. We have a form that would be on our website. This would be a Google form that would be able to be uploaded, and we could, all the principals would have access to this, and it sorts by school. We also have bus numbers on there so that Hal can make sure he knows and updates bus drivers about who has this. This form and this information would actually link to PowerSchool. And if you're a classroom teacher, you could look at your PowerSchool slide, and Mr. Carr, of course, is the expert in PowerSchool, but basically you would be able to know who in your classroom for first period has a mask out option signed and part of what we have. So that's an easy way to sort it. Teachers are on PowerSchool all the time. It's another thing they would have to do. It's another thing they would have to look for. And we all know that they're extremely busy, so I do want to point that out. This is one more thing that we would be asking teachers and principals to do, which I'm very mindful of that, and I know you are as well. But that is a way that they can check to know who has an opt-out form on file. An opt-out form would be required. You've heard the attorneys talk about that. This is something that would be required. If an opt-out form is not on file and you've required masks to be worn, that would be problematic.
Well, your slide suggested dress code violations
Right.
in our discipline policy.
Right. And I'll be honest, last year, I don't think we had many problems. In fact, I know we didn't. We did not have many problems at all with students or staff really wearing the mask. As the year waned on, we started seeing a little bit more of that, which is understandable, but in the heightened part of COVID, when it was really going strong last year, we really did not have issues. And I went to all the schools and I walked the hallways and I saw it. Now, I'm not gonna say everyone was doing it 100%, but I would say a majority were doing exactly what they needed to do.
You know, if they see that visual where they know that if they have their mask on, they're not going to be quarantined.
Right.
I think that speaks loudly to the parents and to the kids too.
Sure.
Charlie, you have any thoughts?
That bottom paragraph that's what I like, because I don't know about y'all, but in the last spring, I was getting burned up with phone calls and stuff, you know, my kid perfectly healthy and everything, but if we do it this way and they got their mask on and they're not showing any symptoms, they can stay in school. Well, did y'all get a lot of calls too?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
you know, but I like that last paragraph there for me.
It's that
Big.
last paragraph is fairly new, and it does allow us more leeway in how we operate in a school setting. And if we're If this is the way that the board chooses to go, which, it's your option at this point to go this direction, I think it's another mitigation tool that we can use to help keep our schools going, our classrooms going, our athletic teams going, band, choir, theater. If everyone is doing this appropriately, this gives us some more tools in our tool bag to help keep schools open and lessen the opportunity, or maybe the chance for us to have to go remote or do other things. Not saying that it can't happen or won't happen, but it would be one other way that we may can stay open.
Clarify one other, I'm sorry, no, go ahead. Clarify one other thing. If a student who tests positive is not wearing a mask, even those sitting around him who had masks on will still have to be quarantined, right?
I'm gonna look at Laura Hudson, she's our pro at this.
Yes, that is correct. It has to be both the case and the contacts. So yes, that is true. But the more people that we have masking, the less chance that we're gonna have to.
So by wearing a mask, you would keep other kids from being quarantined.
Yes,
if they become
absolutely.
positive.
Yes.
Carolyn?
Don, in light of what we saw last year in wearing masks, what we hear that masks help, and thinking mostly what's best for our children, I make a motion that we require masks.
Okay. Is there a
Knowing
second?
that parents still can opt out.
With the governor,
Yes,
respecting the
because
governor.
of the executive order.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Can I,
Yes.
Wayne, I would like for us, if we could to amend that to add staff as well.
Yes, sure.
That would be for students and staff.
Yes,
If you're gonna go down this road, I think it needs to be
Yeah.
both parties.
right.
With some caveats in there, and that's something we'll talk about next. If you want to look at, may want to look at the next slide and make sure.
But staff can't opt out.
Staff cannot opt out except for medical reasons. And we have a form for that will be coming from, Kelly Kaiser will basically communicate with the staff, letting them know about this procedure if it's passed. Which would then we'd have a form that they could fill out if it was a medical reason.
Krista, is that okay with you for the second as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. David,
You know these clear masks that you see people wear?
Right.
Do those work? Do those count as masks?
That does not count as a mask.
Yeah.
It does
I
not.
was thinking if you're teaching a foreign language,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah, I wish it did, but it
Yeah.
does not. You do have to have a mask that covers the nose and the mouth. The face mask, the shield, does not. It's an extra protection, but it's not a mask.
So last year, if a teacher was in front of the classroom, 6 feet in front, and she was teaching French, she could take off her mask if she was socially distanced from the whole class. Would that still stand with
Yeah.
this?
Yes.
6
Okay.
feet is still the standard. So
Okay.
as long as you can keep 6 feet, you wouldn't be contact traced anyways.
So you could take it off.
So
Krista?
I was just gonna point out too, the masks, much like Dr. Dyer wears, that are they're a different kind of
Right.
material. There's
Right.
space technology or whatever. You can see the mouth through that a little bit better.
Yeah, so
And that is an option.
when I wear this is not an endorsement for this mask company. But my mask, it looks like from this side is not fully covered, but when you look on the inside, it is. So when you put it on, you can still somewhat see
Your
me.
face.
Yeah.
And,
wouldn't be
but it's
a
fully
full
covered
bunch.
on the inside as well.
No.
You can tell us the company later.
I can tell you the company all
And
forever.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, I just seen
No, but
those.
yeah.
But you can
and it-
say 6 feet away and you
Yeah.
can demonstrate how you're supposed to pronounce. Okay.
Tom, do you have any comments?
Well, I was reading something yesterday, and not the local paper, but a paper, and it was talking about, this is airborne, this is not through touching and things like that. And it was talking about the number of shields and all these kind of things that you see in restaurants and things like that, and those are so non-effective.
That's what I thought.
Because you have all the air and if I go to one particular restaurant here to pay my bill, I always step around it and shake hands with the owner of the restaurant. And, we talk about family and all of that, and his shield is still there. So they were talking about, what are we gonna do with these millions, billions of dollars worth of plexiglass now that are laying around somewhere that are kind of useless, where that reflects back to the shield compared to the mask. It just doesn't do what It should do.
Any other comments on this motion?
What about Nate?
If I could, I'd like to, if it's okay with the board, kind of walk through the next slide just to make sure, I don't know if it needs to happen right now or before. If you decide to go down this way, I've got some procedures that could go with this, and I don't know if you need to work that into your
Well, let's look at
motion
them.
or
and
not.
then if we-
So I'm just asking, do you
Yeah.
want to vote now or do you want to look at this?
Go ahead,
more?
let's look.
I wrote this out that, and it says, if masking is approved, then these are some procedures that go with this that I would ask to be approved as well. And I don't know if it needs formal approval or just, stating that this is kind of the internal procedures we would use. But, we have a lot of events that happen at a school system, whether it be a football game, basketball games, choir concerts, and so forth. I've just written these out. You all get final decision-making on these, but masking in these cases, this is what I've drafted. Masking is requested but not required for events happening outside of regular school hours, concerts, athletic events, etc. Just because it's the case, it would be almost impossible, virtually impossible to, at a football game, for example, mandate a mask, wearing a mask. Same thing at a volleyball game or a band concert when you have 300, 400 people there and things like that. So that's one piece of this. I think we do have to be realistic about it. While we're in a school setting, that's one thing, we do have control there. But when you have a big gathering such as those athletic events or bigger events such as band concerts, it would be really difficult for us to enforce that. We can remind people, please wear a mask and things like that, but it would be virtually impossible to enforce it. The second part of that, I'm asking not be required for classes or events taking place outside. That's a good time for a mask break. I can tell you from just being at the middle school, a lot of times after lunch or before lunch, they take their students for a walk, and it's a great time to take the mask off and just breathe and be outside, enjoy a little fresh air. So that's something that I would ask that if a classroom is at an outside classroom environment, or they're taking a walk outside, or recess time, things like that, masking not be required. I would also just ask that we not make this the case that masks are required necessarily all year. I think it would be good for us to each month come back together. Now, we are having our regular meeting on Tuesday of next week. That's not soon enough. That's a little too soon. So if you do mandate masks, I would ask that when we start back in October at our board meeting, let's look at the data. We can go through and determine if this is something that needs to continue. I would love to get to October and all of a sudden COVID-19 is gone back down again. And then maybe we could do away or make a different decision, but we don't know that. So we could revisit this every month at our meeting. That would be great. I've already told you about the opt-out form. That would be in English and Spanish. We would need one opt-out form per child. So if you have 3 students that are or 3 children that are part of our schools, you would have to complete that 3 different times just because it populates to a Google form and we need to have a spreadsheet for that. And then also, I would ask the mask mandate not to go into effect if you choose to do this until we come back after Labor Day. So Tuesday, September 7th, that gives us time the rest of today and tomorrow to get the word out, to work with our principals, to let them know exactly what's happening and what they need to prepare for, to allow families to go to the opt-out form, allow us to put that on our website and do all the pieces that need to happen and get that news out there about exactly what's happening. So that would be, these are the practical side of things, the protocols that I would just ask that we, I don't know if they necessarily need to be part of what you're
We could add it to the motion. Your motion would stand the way it is, plus the logistics that Dr. Dyer has recommended.
The only other
Is that
part,
okay with you too, Krista?
and I know you and I talked about that beforehand, is you may want to say if Executive Order 84, I don't know the right word for that, is
Overturned in court.
overturned or
Yeah.
something happens where Executive Order 84 is no longer in effect, then a mask mandate would be for all. Because that's practically what would happen anyway in this case.
Yeah, and I wonder if the way it was worded there in terms of the mask mandate, says considering Executive Order 84 or something like that, might do that again, maybe we need to consult with Chuck
Right.
Hagel to see how to word that appropriately, but just that we aren't necessarily as a board adopting it with the opt-out, that we are going to respect the opt-out order as it is, unless it's deemed null at some point.
Yes.
So the motion would say we're going to have a mask mandate respecting the governor's executive order 84 that it allows for an opt-out.
I assume
with-
that would work.
With the logistics recommended. And then if that goes away, then so does the opt-out.
If a student has been, had the vaccine, would that be a reason to opt out?
The opt-out is truly just if a parent decides to do that. The vaccine is not an opt-out.
And you can still spread the virus even if you've had the vaccination. Charlie?
And we're not allowed to have to take the vaccine, and that's not either. So.
Okay.
Questions for Laura. Cleveland Middle School, if a student opts out and they're not wearing a mask, and they're sitting in that classroom at Cleveland Middle, everyone around them.
Yes, it has to be the case and the contact, both
Okay,
have
so
to be
both are
masked
to be masked, right?
to be excluded, yes.
Okay. I agree with what you said about outside events. I don't know if you saw this in paper, and I think it would help this whole country. LSU, as big as they are, you have to have a vaccination shot, card, you have to have proof, and then nothing's wrong with you. If every school did that for football, as big as football is, it would help a lot. Because a lot of old guys are Tennessee fans, Carolyn, LSU fans, oh, I'm not gonna get that vaccination. If it means they can't go to that game, it might help. I mean, but I know we can't do it at a high school level, but
We'll see things coming down the pike, I think, that affect people's pocketbooks, that will encourage the vaccinations too, but that's, thank goodness, out of our decision-making purview anyway.
This should keep a lot of kids from having to be quarantined, and we had a lot that missed school last year because of having been quarantined.
We want to keep everybody safe, that's our bottom line, and I know there's mixed emotions about masking, and I appreciate everybody's right to make that decision, but you know, when you talk about the right to make the decision for your own child, you have to remember your own child is in a classroom or in a school with lots of other children. And so this board, as a body, we can't worry about one child, we have to worry about all of our children. And what we see in masking data right now is that this is the best protection, other than the vaccination, that we can do for our students, as well as those other mitigating efforts that schools are already doing. And so we have to think collectively about all of our students, not just my student. And if a parent has a good reason to opt out, they will. And that's fine, they can do that. Are there any other questions or comments? Is the motion clear, Julie? Do we have it all muddled up for you, or you got it? Okay. She does a great job, doesn't she? We make these motions and add and subtract, and she gets them. All right, we'll have the vote. Then let's do a roll call vote, Julie.
Okay. Dawn,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Peggy,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Charlie,
yes.
Krista,
Yes.
Nate.
Yes.
Okay, vote is unanimous.
We will work, as soon as we're done with this meeting, to start getting the word out to staff, families, everyone, to make sure they understand what you've voted to do today, and we appreciate that vote, and we'll move on this right away.
All right, we have another agenda item here. Dr. Knight, talk about please.
Okay.
Should the cases escalate quite a bit, would you see us saying that we would forego executive 84?
I cannot do that without your
Well, I
blessings on that. But
could we?
I would not suggest we do anything in that regard without consulting legal counsel.
Oh, sure,
You know, we need to consult with Chuck Hagel, because being an executive order, there could be ramifications if the school board or a school system bucks that and decides to go a different direction. So I would be very cautious about me stating anything that could get us into legal jeopardy without us having probably an executive session with Mr. Cagle, just to make sure that we all understand exactly what could happen because of that. But you know, we're gonna look at student safety and staff safety, and that's just something that's paramount in the school we've been doing and what we'll continue to do.
And did it successfully last year.
Yeah, exactly. We had a great last year. We've had a gret this year. I mean, when you go out to schools, learning is happening. It's not all just COVID. We're seeing a great amount of work being done, and it's because we have fantastic teachers, we have fantastic staff, we have fantastic students, and they're getting the job done. But we need to do all we can to help them continue to do that. So I think this will be one more way. And I know not everyone in the community will agree with this, but it's one more way we can help students and staff stay together in schools.
They didn't agree with us before either, so.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to the next item.
Okay, the second item is one, speaking of staff. This is a policy very similar to what we had last year. And it's COVID-19 leave for our staff. And this is something that I believe is just really truly the right thing to do. We do have a number of staff that have COVID or are being quarantined or whatever the case may be regarding COVID. So with this leave, this policy, this policy, if approved, would sunset December 21st, 2021, unless the board at our December meeting or January meeting would vote to expand this to second semester. This policy would be retroactive. That's important to know, retroactive back to July 1, 2021. So we would have to comb through our records, and Cindy's department would basically have to find those who've been out for COVID leave that could be documented and revert sick days over to this. That's something we would work through. This policy would provide 8 days of paid sick leave during the first semester of this year if an employee is unable to work or telework, and that's important. If they can telework, they must. But if they're unable to work or telework because the employee is subject to federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation related to COVID-19, has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID-19, is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and is seeking a medical diagnosis, is caring for an individual subject to or advised to quarantine or isolate due to COVID-19, must be a personal relationship as defined by sick leave policy to the employee, or is caring for his or her son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed, or a person who regularly provides childcare is unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19, and no other suitable person is available to care for the child during the requested point of leave. And then it goes into some definitions there. The very last line of this, employees are not required to exhaust any other paid leave benefit in order to utilize this new category of paid sick leave. So basically those qualifications, if an employee meets that, they could use these 8 days before they would have to dive into personal sick leave that they already have banked. So this is a policy, exactly the same policy that we had beforehand, but it goes into effect this year, and the days instead of 10 are 8 because we can use those weekends to make that 10-day operational.
And it ends in December.
It would end in December,
Unless we.
but it could be renewed and moved to the second semester if we need to.
Any questions? We need a motion to approve this.
Questions?
I move that we move forward with this policy.
Okay, let's make a motion first. Okay, is there a second? Say, Peggy. All right, now questions.
I just wanted to check, I guess check in with Cindy to see, are we financially okay to be able to do this?
Okay,
Yes, we are.
there you go.
That's a good answer.
We're in good shape financially.
We like that answer.
Yeah, and I think this is just the right thing to do. Takes care of our employees. We let it sunset because we really didn't think back in June that we were gonna be back in this, but here we are, and this is the first meeting we've had a chance to make this happen, so here we go.
Well, we just heard all the stories about how their assistants are going and teaching classrooms, or teachers are
Yeah.
teaching 2 or 3, or RTI instructors are doing, I mean, they are all working hard
Yes,
and trying to teach
I agree.
amidst all these other concerns that are going on.
absolutely.
And having a good, normal school year for our students, and this is the least we can do, in my opinion. Anybody else? All right, we'll take the vote then. Julie, you want to do a roll call, please?
Don,
Yes?
Tom,
Yes.
Peggy,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Krista,
Yes.
Nate.
Yes.
All right, it's unanimous. Excellent.
Okay,
Anything
that's
else
it for
on
today.
tonight?
That's it.
Anybody else have anything? Well, then we will officially adjourn by general consent. Thank you all for being here today.
Is our meeting next Tuesday still at 2:30?
2:30 next Tuesday.
Yeah, and it's gonna be,
And I'll send
in the
all
school
that out in the
traffic.
morning.